Pay rent or sleep in the street. That's what my daughter-in-law screamed at me under my own porch light, voice sharp enough to shave paint. I was balancing 2 brown paper bags and a memory, my wife Mary laughing in this same doorway, when I saw the new keypad deadbolt glinting on my front door like a stranger's eye. The house on West 117th in Cleveland, Ohio, wasn't a rental. It was my retirement, my refuge, and the last solid thing I had left with my son gone 8 months. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. I set the groceries down. Cans rolled, thudding against the mat we bought at the county fair. "Mia," I said, "what is this?" She held up a printed sheet, 3 neat boxes. September 1-200, due October 1-200, due November 1-200, due. "Family rate," she smirked. Behind her the oven timer dinged, cheerful as a gavel. I could smell butter and something burnt. "I'm not your tenant," I said. She laughed. "And then you're a squatter." Her glitter sweater shed tiny flecks of gold onto Mary's oak floor. A man's suitcase leaned against the stairs, scuffed black airport tag still on it. I looked past her into the dining room and felt the air thin. My wife's cedar chest had been dragged 2 feet, grooves scratched into the wood like claw marks. On the kitchen counter lay a $2,800 locksmith invoice dated 0914. "Urgent lock change," Mia's hurried signature sprawling across the bottom. "You can't change locks on a man who owns the house," I said. I reached into my jacket and touched the folded 2012 bank letter that said my mortgage was paid, my name alone on that paper, like a talisman. "Try sleeping on that," she replied. I didn't shout. I pressed the Ring doorbell with my thumb, feeling the faint buzz as it woke, little blue light blinking. "Say it again," I told her. She rolled her eyes. "Pay rent or sleep in the street." I saved the clip to my phone and slid it into my pocket. The refrigerator motor hummed. Somewhere upstairs a door clicked shut. I thought of my son Evan, teaching his boy to throw a baseball in the front yard. Summer dust floating like pollen. I thought of his funeral in April, the rain flattening the flags outside the church. "Who's upstairs?" I asked. She crossed her arms. "Guests, they paid." "Because the house is charming Cleveland classic now." She lifted her chin at a framed photo of Mary and me on our 25th anniversary. "You can pay rent like everyone else." I picked up the groceries. "I'm going to step out," I said softly. "Don't touch the cedar chest again." On the porch, the cold cut through my coat, lake air with a metallic edge. I stood under the yellow bulb and watched the streetlights flicker on, one by one. My phone buzzed, a notification from the Ring app. New event saved, 0930, 7:42 p.m. I stared at the timestamp until it steadied into a decision. I walked to the sidewalk and called Pastor Ray. "I might be late Thursday," I said. "I've got a situation." Then I called an elder law office. A buddy from the plant had mentioned, left my name, and asked for a morning appointment. No speeches, no tears. Just a list starting to form in my head. Deed copy from Nora next door. Police report for unlawful lockout. HOA rules on short-term rentals. Screenshots, dates, amounts. If Mia wanted to run this like a business, I would answer like one. I put the keys in my pocket, the old brass front door key still there, heavier than I remembered, and walked into the wind. Tomorrow, I would gather proof. Tonight, I would keep my dignity warm and my temper cold. The house behind me glowed like a stage. The show, whether she knew it or not, had just begun. The first night I slept in my truck, the dashboard clock glowed 3:17 a.m., ticking like a metronome set to shame. I parked 3 blocks from my own house, close enough to see the faint outline of the roofline through the trees, but far enough that Mia wouldn't spot me on her security camera. The cold from Lake Erie slipped under my coat and coiled around my ribs. I used to laugh at men who slept in their cars after arguments, until I became one. The seat beside me was crowded. Mary's framed photo, my old thermos, and the 0930 audio clip from the Ring camera playing in a loop. Pay rent or sleep in the street. I guess she meant it literally. Every repetition scraped away another layer of disbelief until only exhaustion remained. At sunrise, I wiped condensation from the windshield with a flannel sleeve. My stomach ached from gas station coffee and nothing else. I drove past the house once, just once, telling myself it was for closure. The blinds were open. Two strangers, a couple maybe in their 20s, were carrying luggage down the stairs. The woman wore one of Mary's guest robes, white with blue stitching. I leaned closer and caught a glimpse of her phone screen. The Airbnb app open, location pinned to my address. Charming Cleveland classic, entire home. I felt my chest tighten. Guests, Mia had said. She wasn't bluffing. I pulled over half a block away, opened my own phone, and snapped a picture of their car and the app. Evidence, not anger. That's what I kept telling myself. But my hands were trembling. I drove to Edgewater Park and parked by the lake. The water was a sheet of dull metal, waves curling like broken glass. Cleveland autumns aren't kind. They strip trees bare overnight, leave wind howling through the skeletons. I sat there until my phone battery slid under 20%. I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt hollow, like a pipe someone had drained and forgotten. That night I called my wife's old number, the one still listed on our shared cell plan. It rang twice before the automated voice said, "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." I hung up and stared at the phone. The silence that followed was worse than any voicemail. Around 10 a.m. the next day, I drove to my neighbor Nora's house. Her yard was scattered with rakes and pumpkin decorations. When she saw me, her face softened. "Hal, you look like you've been sleeping in a ditch." "Truck," I corrected, and almost laughed. Almost. I told her what happened. The rent demands, the new locks, the Airbnb guests. She shook her head, lips tight. "That girl's lost her soul. You still have your deed, right?" "In the glove box," I said. "Original copy from 2006, paid off in 2012. Then we'll notarize a fresh one. Make it official again. Paper over noise," she offered coffee. I couldn't taste it, but the warmth helped. I left with a plan, get my documents in order, then talk to a lawyer. By afternoon, I sat in the waiting area of attorney Denise Carver's office downtown, an elder law specialist whose business card my pastor had tucked into a church bulletin months ago. The office smelled like ink and lemon polish. When she walked in, she didn't look at me like a victim. She looked at me like a project that could be fixed. "Tell me everything," she said. I laid the papers out, deed, bank letter showing zero balance, the printed rent demands, the locksmith invoice for $2,800, and my phone with the ring clip queued up. She watched the video twice, then looked at me. "She's running short-term rentals out of your property without your consent, and locking you out of your legal residence. That's 2 violations already. So what do I do? First, you stop sleeping in your truck," she said. "Second, you start a paper trail. Everything from now on, screenshots, dates, bank statements, becomes evidence. We'll file for unlawful lockout, notify the HOA about the Airbnb, and we'll get you back in." Her voice steadied me. It had that steel calm that only comes from someone who's seen too many people lose everything before fighting back. When I left her office, I drove to a cheap motel off Lorraine Avenue. $48 a night, faded carpet, heater that groaned like an old man's knee. But it was mine for now. I unpacked the basics: toothbrush, phone charger, deed folder. Before turning in, I opened my notebook and wrote 3 words at the top of a blank page. Paper, proof, patience. Outside, Cleveland's wind moaned through the alleyways. I thought about my son, Evan, again. The way he used to say, "Dad, you always keep receipts for everything." I smiled through the ache. "You were right, kid," I whispered. This time the receipts might just save me. I plugged in my phone, opened the Ring app one more time, and watched the blue light blink as it uploaded another clip from the porch. Mia laughing with someone, wineglass in hand. She didn't know I was watching. She didn't know I was done breaking down, because when grief runs out of tears, it starts making lists, and mine had just begun. I didn't plan revenge. I planned boundaries, on letterhead in ink with witnesses. That's the difference between bitterness and justice. 2 mornings after meeting Denise, I woke before dawn in that motel off Lorraine Avenue. The heater clicked on and off like a tired heartbeat. I made coffee from a paper packet, sat at the edge of the bed, and opened my notebook. Across the top of the first clean page, I wrote the word plan, underlined twice. Below it, bullet points: police report for unlawful lockout, certified deed copy from Nora HOA complaint for short-term rental violations, cease and desist letter, plain English, not threats, one trusted witness. The morning light was grey and cautious, same as me. I'd lived 68 years, believing that good manners could fix almost anything. Now I understood they only work on people with manners too. At 9 sharp, I walked into the 2nd District Police Station and filed the report. The officer, a young guy named McAllister, read the locksmith invoice, the ring transcript, the note demanding rent. "She locked you out of a home that's in your name?" he asked. I nodded. He scratched his head. "You've got her, Mr. Whitman. We'll log this." He tore off a yellow slip with the incident number and handed it to me. "Keep this safe. Paper's better than promises." From there, I drove to Nora's. She'd already set up her notary seal on the kitchen table beside a half-eaten slice of pumpkin pie. "You know," she said, wiping her hands, "Mary always said you kept the world in folders." "Still do," I replied. "It's just that now the world bit back." She stamped the deed copy and slid it across the table. "Now it's official again. Nobody can gaslight paper." That afternoon, I stopped by St. James Church to see Pastor Ray. He was folding bulletins for Sunday service. I told him what was happening, every detail. He listened quietly, then said, "Write it down, Hal. Every word. Truth without proof is gossip. Truth with proof is power." So that night, back at the motel, I opened my laptop and wrote the cease and desist letter under Denise's guidance. Every line was calm, polite, and sharp enough to draw legal blood. Effective immediately: cease and desist all rental activity and unlawful interference with the lawful owner's occupancy. Failure to comply will result in HOA fines and court action. Denise reviewed it by email, sent it back with one comment: "Perfect tone. Send certified mail." I walked to the post office the next morning, October 16th, paid $9.82 for certified delivery, green card and all. Watching the clerk stamp that label gave me something I hadn't felt in weeks: control. Later that same day, I called a realtor, Marcus Chen, whose card Denise had given me. He met me at a coffee shop on Detroit Avenue. Grey suit, warm grin, firm handshake. "You thinking of selling?" he asked. "I'm thinking of drawing a line," I said. He looked at the deed, the report, the letter. "If we list the house, you can stay through Christmas under an occupancy clause. Buyer gets title, you get peace. How much?" "Market's good." "Maybe $389,000, he said, scribbling notes. I nodded. "List it. Let's make sure she doesn't see it coming." That evening, I went home, my home, though I didn't step inside. Parked across the street, I watched Mia through the window. She was hosting again. Laughter, clinking glasses. I zoomed in on my phone and recorded short clips of strangers walking through rooms I'd painted myself. In one frame, I caught something else. A stranger picking up my son's signed Cleveland Indians baseball, tossing it once, setting it down like junk. That ball had survived 2 moves, 1 flood, and a funeral. My throat tightened. I hit pause and saved the clip to a folder labeled Proof. Back at the motel, I called Pastor Ray again. "I need a favor," I said. "At Thanksgiving dinner, when everyone's there, I want you to read a letter. You'll know when." He chuckled softly. "You writing a sermon now, Hal?" "More like a closing argument. I'll keep it sealed," he promised. "And I'll pray she shows up." When I hung up, I stared at the motel ceiling, smoke-stained and cracked like old parchment. I realized something. I wasn't getting even. I was getting free. The next morning, I went back to the house just long enough to slip that certified envelope into the mailbox. I didn't knock, didn't speak, just walked away, listening to the faint click of the doorbell camera picking up my retreat. She thought she'd changed the locks to shut me out. What she didn't know was I just unlocked the law, and laws, unlike families, don't forgive. They enforce. The first envelope landed with a quiet thud on the porch. No shouting, no drama, just a clean green certified card attached and my return address typed neatly in the corner. That's how justice walks in, politely. It was October 16th, a Monday, grey sky over Cleveland, rain holding its breath. I parked across the street and watched through my windshield as Mia came outside in her slippers. holding her phone in one hand and a mug in the other. She bent down, picked up the envelope and flipped it over twice, like she was deciding whether to open a snake basket. Then she tore the flap open and started reading. I'll never forget her face, eyebrows rising, then flattening. Her mouth moved silently, probably mouthing the words, "Cease and desist." When she slammed the door shut, I smiled for the first time in a month. The next day, I followed Denise's checklist to the letter. First stop, Cleveland Police Department, to attach the certified letter copy and the HOA violation printouts to my existing incident file. Officer McAllister stapled the new pages together. "Building a record," he said, nodding. "Good move." Then I drove to the bank on Detroit Avenue and opened a trust account. I named it the Whitman Family Trust. Denise would act as co-trustee, ensuring no one, not even Mia, could touch the funds meant for my grandkids. I put down a small deposit, $500, just to start the clock. "Why now?" the teller asked. I looked her dead in the eye. "Because peace needs paperwork. Back home, well, what used to be home, I parked at the curb again, engine idling. It felt strange stalking my own house, but I needed one last piece of proof. Through the living room window, I could see a young man I didn't recognize vacuuming the rug Mary had picked out 20 years ago. The Airbnb guests were still coming. She hadn't stopped a thing. So I opened the Ring app and checked the feed. The camera inside the den, one I'd quietly installed before leaving, caught everything. On October 13th, I'd recorded 2 guests wheeling out suitcases. One of them lifted my son's signed baseball again, tossed it in the air and laughed. That clip alone was worth gold in court. I forwarded it to Denise with a single line, "Still renting." She texted back 5 words that sounded like a verdict. Then we moved to injunction. That night I met Marcus, the realtor, at the diner near Lorraine Avenue. He spread the listing paperwork across the table between us. The laminated menus stuck to our elbows. "We go live November 1st, he said. "List price $389,000. Buyer covers closing. You stay until New Year's." He pointed to the clause that protected my occupancy. "Owner retains right to occupy master suite through December 31st, 2025. "That'll do," I said, signing my name. My hand didn't shake this time. When I left, the neon diner sign reflected in a puddle, red, then gold, then gone when I stepped through it. I realized the last time I'd signed something that big was Mary's hospice paperwork. Funny how life gives you 2 kinds of signatures, one to end suffering and one to start healing. On October 20th, I walked back into the bank with Marcus and Denise to open the escrow for the house sale. The banker smiled when she saw my stack of documents. "You've got everything lined up," she said. "It's almost like you've done this before." "Once," I said. "When I paid this place off the first time. We set the closing for December 22nd, just before Christmas. I asked that the proceeds go straight into the trust." Denise added the clause herself. "Spendthrift provision excludes non-beneficiary spouses." That evening, I drove past the house again. The porch light glowed like nothing had happened. But inside, I knew the storm was gathering paper by paper. Around 8, Mia texted me for the first time since the blow-up. "Need rent by Friday, or I'll have to call someone." I didn't reply. I just took a screenshot and filed it under evidence. Later, when I pulled into the motel lot, rain started tapping the windshield like typewriter keys. I watched the droplets slide down, each one a date, an invoice, a proof. I whispered them out loud. September 14th, locksmith. September 30, ring clip. October 5th, Airbnb listing. October 16th, cease and desist. Each date was a nail. And I was quietly building the coffin for her scheme, one document at a time. The next morning, I bought a new brass key at the hardware store and had it engraved, "Peace of Mind." The clerk laughed. "That for a new house?" "Not yet," I said. "But soon." Because the truth was simple. Mia thought she'd trapped me out of my own home. What she didn't know was that I'd already sold it spiritually. The moment she tried to turn it into a business, Now it was just time to make it official, on paper, in ink, and in front of witnesses. And when I finally handed over that deed in December, I wanted her to hear the sound of the pen scratching across it and realize what she'd really sold. Me. I wasn't paying rent. I was collecting interest. Money doesn't lie. It lists its own trail in numbers, dates, and signatures. And by late October, mine told a story that Mia could no longer rewrite. The first proof came from the HOA letter, dropped through my motel's mail slot on October 23rd. The fine was printed in bold, $500 first offense, $250 per day thereafter for illegal short-term rentals. I unfolded it 3 times, ran my thumb along the seal, and smiled. Paper was speaking louder than shouting ever could. I scanned the letter and sent it to Denise, who replied within minutes. Perfect timing. We add this to the file. She's building her own gallows. 2 mornings later, I drove back to my old street. The maple leaves had turned a dark bronze, crackling under my shoes as I crossed the sidewalk. Mia's car sat in the driveway, trunk half open. When I knocked on the door, she appeared in pajamas, hair tied up, holding a mug that said, "Boss Lady, you're listing the house." She snapped before I even spoke. I saw it online. "Don't you dare sell what Evan left me." I kept my voice even. "Evan never owned it, Mia. His name isn't on the deed." I took the 2012 payoff letter and the notarized copy of the deed from my folder and slid them across the counter. This house was paid in full 12 years ago. My name, my payment, my home. Her eyes flicked over the documents, but her jaw stayed tight. "You think anyone will buy it with me still living here?" "Someone already did," I said softly. "They like houses with clean titles and noisy tenants." For a second, the only sound in the room was the coffee maker sputtering behind her. Then she laughed, short, bitter, scared. "You can't kick me out, Harold. Family court will eat you alive." "I'm not kicking you out," I said, gathering my papers. "I'm stepping out myself." "Big difference." Her smirk faltered when I picked up my phone and hit play on the ring clip. The familiar words filled the kitchen. Pay rent or sleep in the street. She glanced at the doorway, maybe realizing how it would sound to a judge. "I'm giving you time," I added. "The buyers close on December 22nd. You've got until then to make other plans." That night, I sent Denise the latest recording and the HOA letter. She called immediately. "We'll notify her formally. No confrontation from your end anymore. Let the paperwork do the talking." And it did. On November 1st, Marcus went live with the listing. I watched the photos upload on his screen. The warm wood floors, the kitchen island, the same front porch where Mia had once screamed at me. Within hours, the first offer came in, $389,000, $10,000 earnest deposit, occupancy clause protecting me until December 31st, plus $7,500 relocation assistance. I remember staring at those numbers like they were coordinates leading back to sanity. "They're serious?" I asked. Marcus nodded. "These people buy community properties for senior housing. They'll treat the place right. That's all I wanted," I said. On November 10th, I got one more text from Mia, one $200 rent, due today or you're out. I screenshotted it, forwarded it to Denise, and ignored it. Denise replied with her usual calm. "Every message is a receipt of character. Keep collecting." Days later, I met Pastor Ray at the church kitchen. He was preparing for the Thanksgiving drive, hands dusted in flour. "Still on for dinner?" he asked. "Yes," I said, handing him the sealed envelope. "Read this when everyone's seated." He turned it over in his palm, nodding solemnly. "A truth revealed over food. It's as old as Scripture." As Thanksgiving neared, my nerves hummed with the steady rhythm of completion. Every item on my list was checked, every document notarized, every message archived. But at night, sleep came slow. I'd lie in the motel bed, eyes open, watching the headlights flash across the ceiling, wondering when dignity had become something you had to prove in ink. On November 25th, Marcus confirmed everything: the closing schedule, the trust transfer, the buyer's signatures. "We'll meet December 22nd, he said. "After that, your house becomes a non-profit property. You'll be free." Free. I'd forgotten what that word felt like. 2 days later, Thanksgiving arrived. I ironed my one good shirt, packed my evidence folder just in case, and drove to Pastor Ray's house. The air smelled of turkey, cloves, and quiet confrontation. As I parked at the curb, I saw my grandkids playing in the yard, their laughter cutting through the November chill. Mia's car was already there, shiny as ever. I checked my pocket for the flash drive, the one holding every video, every receipt, every text. My hands didn't shake this time, because I wasn't coming to fight. I was coming to finish. Thanksgiving smells like butter and confession when you've planned it right. The air inside Pastor Ray's house was thick with cinnamon and tension. Every chair at that long oak table had a story attached to it, and tonight all those stories were about to meet their ending. Mia arrived late. Of course she did. She swept in, wearing a glittering gold sweater and perfume strong enough to cover guilt. She kissed both kids on the forehead and gave me a tight smile that could have been carved from glass. "You made it," she said, like she owned the invitation. "I always do," I answered, setting down the dish I'd brought. Mary's molasses cookies, her recipe card tucked underneath the plate. The smell alone steadied me. The turkey steamed in the center of the table. Pastor Ray led grace. "Lord, bless this food and those who share it." I watched Mia close her eyes for the prayer, and for one silent second, I saw the woman she might have been if greed hadn't eaten her. Halfway through dinner, she raised her wine glass. "To new beginnings," she said, smiling at the kids. Everyone murmured polite agreement. Then she turned to me. "Hal, maybe with the house situation settled, we can finally have peace." I set down my fork. "Yes," I said. "Peace is exactly what I came for." Pastor Ray glanced at me. "Our signal." He tapped his fork gently against his water glass. "Before dessert," he said, "Harold asked me to read something." Mia froze, smile flickering. "What's this about?" "Just a few words," I said, folding my hands. Ray opened the sealed envelope. The paper trembled slightly in his old fingers. He began to read. "This home was my wife Mary's last Christmas. Its walls hold my son Evan's laughter. I will not pay rent to fear." These are the dates that built my decision. September 14th. Locksmith invoice for $2,800, unauthorized. September 30th. Recorded threat. Pay rent or sleep in the street. October 5th. Airbnb listing for my address, complete with strangers sleeping in my bed. Ray paused and looked up. The room was silent except for the ticking of the wall clock. I have gathered every document. I've sold the house I built, not out of spite, but to protect what my son left behind, his children. The proceeds, $361,400 after closing, will go into the Whitman Family Trust for them alone. Effective December 22nd, all rights transfer to the buyer. Mia Whitman holds no claim. Mia's fork clattered onto her plate. "You can't. What is this?" she shouted. Her cheeks burned red. "You're humiliating me in front of my children." "No," I said quietly. "You did that yourself." She turned to Pastor Ray. "You can't read that here." "This is family business." He set the letter down. "Then perhaps it's time this family remembered what business looks like." I pulled my phone from my pocket and hit play on the Ring video. Her voice filled the room, sharp and unmistakable. "Pay rent or sleep in the street." The kids looked at her, eyes wide. Even the football game murmuring from the living room went silent. "You recorded me?" She gasped. "I preserve the truth," I said, "because truth fades when you yell over it." I slid the offer sheet across the table. $389,000, $10,000 earnest money. Closing December 22nd. Occupancy through year-end for me only. She scanned it, hands shaking. "You sold my house?" "No," I corrected, my voice low but steady. "I sold my house." The kids stared between us, confused, hurt. I kept my focus on her. The trust protects their inheritance. "You can't touch a dime, Mia. You wanted rent. You'll never collect it again." She laughed once, brittle and strange. "You're senile." "I'll get a lawyer." "You should," I said. "Denise Carver, elder law specialist. She'll introduce you to mine. Just bring your paperwork." "Oh, wait, you don't have any." Her chair scraped the floor as she stood. "You think this is justice?" she hissed. "You're tearing this family apart." "No," I said, standing too. "You did that when you turned our home into a side hustle. For a long second, nobody breathed. Then Mia grabbed her coat and stormed out. The screen door slammed, shaking the frame. Through the window, I saw her car fishtail a little on the icy driveway before disappearing down the street. Pastor Ray let out a sigh that sounded like prayer. "Well," he said softly, "truth is best served warm, I suppose." The kids looked at me, uncertain. I knelt beside them. "None of this is your fault," I said. "The house will take care of you even when we can't." After they went to the den, I sat back down. The turkey had gone cold, but my pulse finally slowed. Ray poured 2 cups of coffee, black and bitter. "You did right, Hal," he said. "You didn't punish her, you prevented her." I looked at the empty chair where Mia had sat, crumbs still on the placemat. "I just wanted peace," I murmured. "Mary always said peace costs paperwork." "And now you've paid in full," Ray said. Outside, snow had started falling, flakes catching in the yellow porch light. I slipped the deed folder back into my briefcase and zipped it shut. The zipper sounded final, like the lid on a coffin. When I stood to leave, Ray stopped me at the door. "You sure you're ready for the fallout?" I smiled faintly. "She's already falling, Pastor." I just stopped catching her. The night air bit at my cheeks as I walked to my truck. I looked back once at the house, the warm windows glowing like forgiveness I wasn't sure I deserved. But the truth was simple. I hadn't ruined Thanksgiving. I'd reclaimed it. Driving back to the motel, I replayed the look on Mia's face when she realized the sale was real, the trust untouchable. It wasn't gloating that warmed me. It was closure. For months she'd turned my grief into leverage. Tonight I turned her arrogance into evidence, and as the snow fell heavier, uncovering the city in white silence, I finally whispered what I'd been waiting to say since September 30th. "You said pay rent or sleep in the street." "Well, Mia," I chose neither. I pulled onto Lorraine Avenue, headlights catching the snowflakes like sparks. Behind me, the house, the one she thought she'd conquered, was already slipping into someone else's. And what she didn't realize was that she'd just attended the quiet funeral of her own scheme, and I was the one who wrote the eulogy. In December, truth started showing up with a return address. The day after Thanksgiving, I woke in the motel to a thud at the door, a thick manila envelope from Mia's lawyer. "Notice of marital claim," the header said, typed in a font that tried too hard to sound official. I took a long breath, made coffee and called Denise. She met me that same afternoon in her office downtown, grey slush outside, warm halogen light inside. "She's claiming marital rights to the house through Evan," Denise said, flipping pages. "Problem is, Evan never owned it. There's no title history linking her to the property. She's still going to drag me through it, isn't she?" "Probably," Denise said, lips curling into something between pity and amusement. "But remember, when you have facts, you don't need fear. We'll file a response with Evan's probate record and your 2012 payoff letter." She's building her own quicksand. That phrase stuck with me. Quicksand. It doesn't swallow you all at once. It waits for you to move. By December 1st, Mia made her second move, more Airbnb guests. I knew because I still got the notifications. Old smart home apps never forget their master account. The listing had changed its title to Winter Retreat near Lake Erie. Cute. What wasn't cute were the new guests arriving while I still technically owned the house. I emailed the proof to Denise, who wasted no time. "We're done playing," she said. "I'll file an injunction Monday." And she did. On December 5th, a judge signed an emergency order halting all rental activity pending sale. The next morning, the Airbnb listing vanished like a ghost in daylight. The HOA sent me another letter, that same week, confirming Mia's fines had crossed $3,000. "We can lien the property if unpaid," the letter warned. I smiled. By December 22nd, it wouldn't be her problem or mine. It would be the buyers, and they already knew what they were inheriting. I drove by the house on December 10th for the last time before the closing inspection. Snow dusted the front porch rail. From the street it looked peaceful again, as if the chaos had only ever been a rumor. Then I saw the garage door slightly open. Inside, I found what felt like the final insult, my wife Mary's cedar chest. Lid cracked, contents scattered. Her old choir robe, a Polaroid of us in 1975, and one of Evan holding his newborn son. I picked up the photo, brushed the sawdust off, and slipped it into my coat pocket. There, under a half-empty paint can, I spotted something shining, the original brass key, the one Mia had replaced with her digital lock. I turned it in my hand. It felt heavier than I remembered, cold but honest. "Welcome back," I whispered. That same night my phone buzzed with a text from Mia. "I'm sorry, Harold. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Money's been tight." I was scared. For a second I wanted to believe her. I even typed out a response. "We can talk about it after the sale." But then I remembered every shouted word, every stranger sleeping under my roof. I deleted the draft and wrote instead, "I wish you peace. But I'm done living under your fear." I didn't hear from her again. By December 18th, Marcus and the buyers met me at the house for the final walkthrough. The rooms were half empty, echoing in a way that made every footstep sound like goodbye. Marcus flipped through the inspection checklist. "Everything looks good," he said. "You ready for the 22nd? "Been ready since September," I said. Looking at the faint scratches where the cedar chest used to sit, we stood in the living room, the same spot where Mia once yelled about rent, and listened to the hum of the furnace. "You know," Marcus said, "you're the calmest seller I've ever met." "I've already lived through the fire," I told him. "This part's just smoke clearing." When I left, I locked the door with that brass key one last time. It turned smoothly, like it remembered who it belonged to. I slid it into my pocket and walked to the truck without looking back. 3 days later, December 21st, a light snow began falling over Cleveland. The city felt quieter than it had in months, muffled under a white sheet of peace. I spent that evening at Pastor Ray's, eating leftover pie and talking about the upcoming closing. "She's not going to show up, right?" he asked. "No," I said. "She's too busy pretending she still lives there." Ray chuckled softly. "Well, God handles pride the same way winter handles leaves. Sooner or later it all falls." That night I drove back to the motel for the last time. The heater wheezed its usual rhythm, and I realized how much I'd come to appreciate its imperfect comfort. I'd looked at the envelope on the nightstand, the final documents, ready for the next morning. On top of them sat Mary's photo, the same one I'd carried in the truck since that first night. She was smiling, wind in her hair, eyes daring the world to try her. "You'd have laughed at this mess," I whispered. "But I think you'd have been proud of how it ended." The next morning, I ironed my shirt, slipped the deed folder under my arm, and headed out into the pale blue cold. The world was quiet, just how I liked it. When I reached the title office, Marcus was already there, holding a styrofoam cup of coffee. He nodded once. "Let's close this chapter, Mr. Whitman," I smiled. "Let's make it official." And just like that, December 22nd was waiting, paper, pen, and closure lined up in perfect rows. Mia thought she could own me with fear. What she didn't understand was that fear only works until someone decides to document it. The next act wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice finally coming to balance the ledger, and in 4 hours, with one signature, that balance would be paid in full. December 22nd, the day the house finally stopped being mine and started becoming peace. The title office smelled of toner, stale coffee and winter coats damp from snow. Marcus and I sat at a long oak table with the buyers, a couple from the Cleveland Neighborhood Renewal Fund. They smiled politely, the way people do when they're happy to see a good thing put right. Denise was there too, her glasses fogged from the cold. "Let's get this done," she said, sliding a neat stack of papers toward me. The settlement sheet sat on top, black ink, perfect lines. Numbers that meant freedom, $389,000 sale price. $10,000 earnest money, $17,600 in fees, leaving $361,400 net to seller. I signed my name, the way my father taught me. Firm, clean, proud. No hesitation. The pen moved across the paper like it had been waiting for this exact date. Denise leaned closer. Funds will wire directly into the Whitman Family Trust within 24 hours. Spendthrift clause holds. Beneficiaries your grandkids only. Not one penny can be diverted, I nodded. That's all I wanted. The notary stamped her seal, a faint hiss of ink against paper. That sound was better than applause. When it was done, Marcus clapped me on the shoulder. Congratulations, Hal. You've done something rare, sold your past to protect your future. I smiled faintly. It's funny, I said. That house was supposed to be my safety. Turns out safety isn't where you sleep. It's who can't evict you from your peace. We all signed the final line at 11:32 a.m. The clerk handed me a bank confirmation slip showing the wire. 361,400. In the corner, someone had stamped a snowflake, a little holiday logo. Merry Christmas, Mr. Whitman, she said. I don't think she realized how deeply that landed. Afterwards, I drove straight to the credit union and opened the trust account officially. The teller, a young woman with calm eyes, printed the statement and slid it across the counter. You're protecting your grandkids, she said, smiling. That's beautiful. More like overdue, I told her. But thank you. By 3 p.m. the paperwork was complete. Denise and I stopped by the HOA office with a copy of the closing statement and injunction order. The property changed hands today, I said. All outstanding fines are attached to the prior occupant's activity. The woman behind the counter adjusted her glasses, scanned the page, and nodded. Then we'll mark it resolved. Congratulations, Mr. Whitman. Driving home? No, driving away. I realized I didn't even know what to call home anymore. The motel felt temporary. The old house was gone. But there was a quiet freedom in that. For the first time in years, nothing owned me. Not grief, not guilt, not even real estate. I reached the senior apartment complex that Marcus had found for me. It sat just off Lake Avenue, sunlight bouncing off the glass lobby doors. My relocation allowance from the sale, $7,500, had already prepaid a year's rent. The manager, a kind woman named Tessa, handed me the keys. Unit 214, corner view, she said. It's small but bright. Inside, the space smelled new. Fresh paint, clean wood floors, silence. I placed Mary's framed photo on the kitchen counter. For a second, it almost felt like she was about to walk in, humming the way she used to when she baked. I unpacked the essentials. My thermos, the recipe cards, the folder marked final copies. Then I pinned one thing to the wall, the bank receipt showing the wire transfer. Not out of vanity, but as a reminder, some victories don't come with applause. They come with balance sheets and signatures. That night I made tea and watched snow fall past the window. No locks being changed, no shouting. Just the steady hum of the radiator and the whisper of wind. I sent one last email to Denise and Marcus. Funds confirmed. Keys turned in. Case closed. Denise replied, You handled this with grace. Justice served, Mr. Whitman. I looked at the screen a long time before replying, Justice isn't revenge. It's the end of fear. At 9:45 p.m., I turned off the lamp, slipped the brass key from my pocket, and laid it on the nightstand. It caught the light for a moment, glowing softly. Then I closed my eyes. For the first time since Mary's funeral, I slept without checking if a door was locked. Justice, I realized, doesn't make noise. It just lets you rest. Winning doesn't sound like fireworks. It sounds like silence, finally staying silent. 4 days after closing, on December 26th, I woke to a room filled with winter sunlight. The apartment's radiator hissed softly, and for a moment I didn't remember where I was. Then I saw Mary's photo on the counter, the one with her wind-blown hair and mischievous grin, and it came back. I was free. I made coffee in a cheap Mr. Coffee machine I'd bought from the thrift store down the street. The first sip tasted like peace. No shouting, no digital lock codes, no rent notices slid under doors. Just quiet. Around noon I bundled up and walked along the Edgewater Park Trail. The lake was half frozen, sunlight flashing on the ice like shards of glass. Cleveland was still wrapped in post-Christmas calm. No leaf blowers, no deliveries, just a city catching its breath. I stopped by the spot where I'd parked my truck that first night after Mia locked me out. Same crooked lamppost, same view of the shoreline. Back then, I'd sat here crying into my steering wheel, ashamed, angry, lost. Now I stood tall, hands in my pockets, air clean in my lungs. The truck was gone, but the lesson stayed. You can't lose what you're willing to walk away from. When I got home, a white envelope waited under my door. First quarterly statement, Whitman Family Trust. I tore it open carefully. Inside, the balance glowed like quiet validation. 361 to 400, interest accruing, distributions held for beneficiaries. Beneath the numbers, Denise's handwritten note. You did good, Hal. The right kind of good. I sat down at the kitchen table and ran my hand over the paper. It felt heavier than any award I could have won. It wasn't about money. It was about dignity, preserved through ink and patience. Later that evening, Pastor Ray stopped by with a foil-covered plate of leftovers. Thought you might not have cooked yet, he said. Turkey sandwiches taste better with closure. We ate together, laughing at how small the world felt after a storm ends. He looked around the apartment. Simple place, he said, but peaceful. Peace is worth square footage, I said. He smiled. You know, you didn't just protect yourself, Hal. You protected your son's kids from learning the wrong kind of lesson. That hit me. I'd been so focused on saving what was mine that I hadn't realized what I was teaching by doing it, that standing up doesn't have to mean shouting back. Sometimes it just means signing your name on the right line and walking away. After he left, I pulled out my notebook, the one where I'd first written paper, proof, patience. The pages were worn now, corners dog-eared. I turned to the last blank page and wrote, Lesson number 37. You can rebuild your life from receipts if you kept your integrity in the drawer. Then I took out 2 small library cards I'd gotten earlier that week. On each I wrote my grandkids' names. Beneath them, my new address. I slipped the cards into an envelope with a short note. Your mum made mistakes, but she's still your mum. My boundary isn't to punish her, it's to protect you. There's always room for both truth and love. I mailed it before I could second-guess it. That night, snow began again, quiet and steady. I sat by the window thinking of Evan, my boy, who'd always joked that I'd turn into a detective after retirement. You keep every receipt, Dad, he used to say. You could solve a crime just by checking the grocery drawer. He wasn't wrong. I raised my mug toward the night sky. For you, kid, I whispered. And for the grandkids who'll never have to wonder who owned the truth. The radiator clicked once, then went still. Outside, the lake wind softened. Justice, I realized, isn't the opposite of love. It's what keeps love honest. And as the snow thickened, blanketing the city in quiet white, I finally allowed myself to believe what I'd fought so hard for. The house was gone. The noise was gone, but I was still standing, and I was free. ChatGPT can make mistakes. Check important info in January. Cleveland turned white and silent. You could hear the crunch of boots blocks away. It was the first winter in years I didn't dread coming home, because this time, home waited for me, not against me. On January 4th, a letter arrived from Denise, thick envelope, her firm's embossed seal in the corner. Inside was the first official quarterly notice for the Whitman Family Trust, plus a note in her steady handwriting, funds secure. First disbursement for educational use will post March 31st. You did everything right. I traced her words with my finger, like a man reading his own peace treaty. There it was, confirmation that every humiliation, every sleepless night in my truck, every notarized signature had finally built something solid. The next day, I walked to the post office in my heavy coat and wool cap. The wind bit at my face, but it didn't feel cruel anymore, just honest. I mailed a small box to my grandkids, 2 library cards, 1 cookie tin, and a folded note that said, Recipes are how love pays rent. Mary would have liked that line. Later that week, I met Marcus for coffee downtown. He'd brought a printout of the listing photos, the ones from before the sale. They're rehabbing the house already, he said. Non-profits turning it into transitional housing for seniors. I looked at the photos, my old living room, stripped bare, but full of light. Good, I said quietly. Let it hold someone who needs it, Marcus smiled. You know, most people in your situation would have burned the place down, figuratively or otherwise, but you made it pay forward. I wasn't raised to burn what built me, I said. Just to lock the doors once I'm done living there. When I got home, I hung a new calendar on the wall, clean, empty squares stretching through the year, no court dates, no rent-due reminders, just space. I pinned a note on the first page. New year, no fear. That night, I sat on the couch, with a blanket around my shoulders, scrolling through old photos on my phone. There was Mary, holding a pie on the porch, Evan laughing with his boy in the front yard. Then one image stopped me, a frame from the Ring video. Mia mid-scream, mouth open, eyes wild. I stared at it for a moment, then pressed delete. Some evidence deserves to rest too. A week later, Pastor Ray invited me to the community center to help pack care boxes. "We've got seniors moving into new places this winter," he said. "Some of them could use a hand." I showed up early, brought 2 boxes of canned goods and a bag of Mary's molasses cookies. While we worked, he nodded toward me. How does it feel being on the other side? I thought for a moment. Like I traded noise for quiet, and it's the best deal I ever made. He chuckled. Peace always appreciates in value. On the drive home, the radio played one of Mary's favorite hymns. For the first time, I didn't switch the station. I hummed along, window cracked just enough to let in cold air that smelled faintly of salt and snow. When I pulled into the apartment lot, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. For a heartbeat, I thought, maybe Mia. I almost didn't answer, but I did. "Mr. Whitman," a woman's voice said. "I'm calling from the Renewal Fund. We just wanted to thank you again for your cooperation. The first tenants move in next month. We'd love you to stop by for the ribbon-cutting ceremony." I smiled into the cold air. I'd be honored. After the call, I stood by the window, watching the lake ice glitter under streetlights. My reflection looked older, sure, but lighter too. I wasn't the man who slept in his truck anymore. I was the man who'd learned the difference between losing something and letting it go. Before bed, I reached for the brass key on my nightstand, the one I'd kept after the sale. It no longer opened anything, but it reminded me that some doors don't need reopening to prove you survived what was behind them. I turned it once in my palm, whispered, "Thank you," and set it back down. Outside, the wind rattled the window gently, as if testing the locks. They held, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't flinch. ChatGPT can make mistakes. Check important info. February the 2nd, 2026. The invitation came in a crisp white envelope. You are warmly invited to the ribbon-cutting ceremony for Whitman Place, a transitional housing program for senior citizens. Whitman Place. They'd named it after me. I almost laughed when I read it. All those months of pain, legal filings, tears in a parked truck, and now the same address that once echoed with shouting would reopen as a refuge for people who had nowhere else to go. That was irony, all right. The good kind. I put on my best coat and took the city bus to West 117th. Snow was melting along the curbs, the air smelling faintly of salt and exhaust. When I stepped off, I froze. My old house didn't look like my house anymore. Fresh blue paint, a new porch railing, curtains the color of sunshine instead of dust. A small crowd had gathered. City officials, volunteers, 2 local reporters. Marcus waved me over. "Hal," he said, beaming, "I told them you'd come." He introduced me to the program director, Tessa, a young woman with kind eyes. "You built this story," she told me. "It's only right your name's on the sign." They handed me giant ceremonial scissors and guided me toward the red ribbon stretched across the doorway. Cameras flashed. Pastor Ray stood off to the side, hands folded, smiling like a proud father. "Say a few words, Mr. Whitman," someone called out. I cleared my throat, looking at the small crowd, the frosty air curling from my breath. "This house once held a family," I began. "Then it held fear, and now it'll hold hope. That's what a home's supposed to do. Change with us, not against us." I paused. swallowing the lump in my throat. If anyone here ever feels they've lost everything, remember, sometimes losing is just the first step to keeping your peace. Applause rippled through the group. I opened the scissors and cut the ribbon. The sound was clean, final, satisfying. The door swung open and warm air drifted out, carrying the smell of new paint and coffee. Inside, sunlight poured through the front windows onto polished floors. The cedar chest was gone, replaced by a bookshelf stacked with donated novels and blankets. On one wall hung a brass plaque, Whitman Place, established 2025. In gratitude to Harold Whitman, whose courage reclaimed this home for others. I stood there a long moment, tracing the letters with my eyes. A younger volunteer passed me a cup of cocoa. "Feels strange, doesn't it?" she asked. "Strange in the best way," I said, like finding out pain had a purpose after all. Outside, Pastor Ray joined me on the porch. "You did something rare, Hal," he said. "You turned anger into architecture." I smiled. "I just signed papers, Ray." He chuckled. "No, you signed peace into existence." We watched the first residents arrive, an older couple, bundled in thick coats, holding hands as they stepped carefully onto the walk. The woman looked up at the porch with tears in her eyes. "It's beautiful," she whispered. I handed her my cocoa. "It's yours now," I said. As I walked back toward the bus stop, I glanced over my shoulder one last time. The house glowed under the winter sun, alive again. The brass key in my pocket felt lighter than ever. I took it out, looked at its worn teeth, and set it gently on the stone wall by the mailbox. Someone else might need it more than I ever would. The bus pulled up, brakes hissing. I climbed aboard and sat by the window. The street rolled by in slow motion, the same street where I'd once been told to pay rent or sleep in the street. I smiled to myself. I'd done neither. I'd sold the house, kept my dignity, and turned a place of betrayal into a sanctuary. The world, it seemed, still knew how to balance its books. As the city faded behind me, I whispered the truth that had carried me through every cold night, every courthouse visit, every lonely meal. You didn't take my home. You gave me back my life. And that, I realized, was the real revenge. Walking away whole while the past stood frozen behind me, locked out for good.